to recognize the warning signs of identity theft, review the tips for protecting your senior friends and loved ones, and to examine the steps necessary for recovery, which a lot of people don't realize there's a lot involved in getting your identity back again. So let's welcome Amy Burns.
Thank you, Stan, and thank you all to all of you for being here today. I'm excited to share this story with you. Hope it will offer you some tips and some inside information on what to do in case this happens to you or to any of your senior loved ones, is what we are trying to prevent from happening today. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to my father. Dad was born and raised on a farm in the beautiful North Carolina mountains. He held bachelor's and master's degrees from Appalachian State in elementary education, enjoyed a 36-year career with the North Carolina Public Schools, even continued to serve in retirement as the state president of the retired school personnel. Dad was a faithful Christian, loved his church, served in many capacities in the church. He was very wise with his money. I learned a lot from my dad. And not a risk taker. He was very conservative, very careful with his money. He would provide for our family in a wonderful manner. We were not considered wealthy by worldly standards, but Dad took care of us, my mom, my sister Cynthia, and myself, and we were well provided for. He even planned and prepared carefully so that he and Mom could live comfortably in their retirement years. But at age 91, Dad became the victim of identity theft. So, just so we are all on the same page with identity theft and what it means, it involves acquiring key pieces of your information, your identifying information, such as your name, address, date of birth, social security number, and driver's license, in order to impersonate you. Once an individual has that information from you, they can use that information to do all kinds of horrible things, such as taking over your financial accounts, opening new accounts, purchasing new vehicles, and applying for loans or credit cards in your name. In the case of my dad, it was all of the above. Our story begins the first week of January last year, 2021, and one day Mom and Dad got up and their landline phones didn't work at home. It happens. We contacted the phone company, and they said, well, your father had issued a work release or work order 2 days before, requesting that that phone number be ported over to a mobile carrier. Just so happened it was the same mobile carrier where they have their cellular plan. We knew our dad would not have done that, and he vowed and declared he didn't do that. But the bottom line was, when we tried to talk with the mobile carrier, whoever had done this had set up an account with that phone number at the mobile carrier and had attached a PIN to it. Well, of course, we didn't know the PIN, so when we called the mobile carrier, they wouldn't speak with us at all about it. So the bottom line was, Mom and Dad lost the phone number that they had had for 17 years. And folks, you know what a pain that is when you change your phone number, you have to notify your business contacts, but you also lose contact with your personal connections too, your friends, extended family that now don't have the new phone number for you. Hold on to that thought because that becomes more significant in a few minutes. Shortly after that, they were notified by their credit card company. I'm not wanting to click. Excuse me. There we go. By the credit card company who called to investigate some suspicious charges on Dad's credit card. Mom and Dad both had cards on the account, but these charges were on Dad's, and they had been made in a neighboring city to the tune of about $8,000. So the company called. My parents verified that they were not responsible for those charges, and so the company said, we will close the account and we'll mail you new cards. You should have them within a week. Mom got a new card. Dad never did. I also learned throughout this whole process, and I'll share some of this with you today, learned some new lingo and jargon that goes with all of this, things that I never thought I would have to learn. But we learned that what was happening to Dad was he had become a victim of an account takeover. And we started getting letters from the credit card company. Each week, a new letter would come to Dad about your account that ends in numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Every week it was a different card. We never received those cards. Dad never did in the mail. Shortly after that, they got a phone call from their bank, and it was a branch of the bank. And I will go ahead and say Mom and Dad did their banking with the State Employees Credit Union. A lot of the places that I will speak of today, I cannot say the names of where this has happened. Our case is still ongoing and it's still pending, so I can't release some of it. But I will say that the State Employees Credit Union has been wonderful throughout this whole process. And that's where Mom and Dad did their banking. One morning, a girl from a branch that was in the city where Mom and Dad had lived for 50 years before moving to the retirement home called to tell them that someone had called the bank that morning and tried to change the mailing address on Mom and Dad's checking account. And folks, I firmly believe that God puts the right people in the right place at the right time to help us, and that's exactly what happened at the bank that morning. Because of all the employees that could have answered the phone that morning, the one girl that answered that phone call knew Dad very well and recognized that it was not his voice on the phone. So she advised the caller that he would have to come into a branch and make that address change in person. She immediately then locked down the account and called Mom and Dad to tell them what had happened and that they needed to come into the branch and close that checking account because somebody had that number and open a new one. That afternoon, we did just that. I took them to the bank. We opened a new account, and this time we added my name to the account because my parents, as I'm sure all of yours, did not grow up with computers. And so they were not accustomed to doing online banking and electronic transactions and monitoring your accounts on your computer. So that's why we added my name to the account so that I could help monitor the account and look after it for them. The date that day was January 14th. Keep that date in mind. That becomes more significant in a minute as well. After we got the new checking account, then we were tasked with notifying companies. Dad had a couple of companies where he had automatic payments drafted out. We had to give them the new number. But we were most concerned with Social Security. Yeah. Robin, I'm having trouble. Okay, thank you. The magic touch. Thank you, Stan. We were concerned with Social Security because Dad had his monthly Social Security benefit direct deposited into the checking account. So I called Social Security to make this change, and please understand, every time that Cynthia, my sister, and I tried to call these companies, of course, they didn't want to speak with us. So we would have to get Dad on the phone to answer the security questions, then he would give them permission to speak with us. We went through that rigmarole with Social Security, and I'll throw this in just as a side note. Maybe you guys know this. We did not. I, at one point, offered to send the gentleman a copy of Dad's power of attorney designation so that they would know it was okay to speak with us. I was told Social Security Administration does not recognize power of attorney. I did not know that. But what you have to do is set up with them what's called a payee representative, and that's a person who will help you manage your account with Social Security when the time comes that you need help managing your finances. That was just a side note. So we got that set up and went about the task of making sure all the information was correct on Dad's account. Gave them the new checking account number, gave them the new phone number, and then I heard the fellow on the phone say, has your dad ever lived at such and such address in such and such city? And I said, no, never. Are you seeing that on his account? And he said, yes, I sure am. He said, somebody has gone online and changed the mailing address on your dad's account. Well, folks, that was like a punch in the gut, because now we realized that whoever is doing all this now has Dad's Social Security number. This fella was very nice, very helpful, got everything corrected and set up correctly in Dad's account, and fortunately we never had any issues with his Social Security benefit getting in the right place. At that point, we realized that this thing was getting way out of hand and was over our heads, and we needed help. with this. But when this happens, where do you turn? We didn't know. Do we report it to the police in the city where Dad lives? Do we report it to the police in the town where the fraudulent credit card charges were done? Do we report it to the police in the city where they tried to change the mailing address at the bank? Do we need an attorney? We had no idea. We did not know the answers. Fortunately, my sister Cynthia has a friend who was a retired SBI agent, and so she turned to him for help. Let's see if I can get this. Stan? Or Robin. Here we go. I'm going to let you handle this. And he advised us that we did need to report it to the police in the city where Dad lived, because since he was a resident there, it fell under their jurisdiction. We did end up filing 2 more police reports, which I will go into in just a minute. We were also advised to report it to the Federal Trade Commission at identitytheft.gov. So we went online and filled out a form, a report there as well. They also advised us to report it to the 3 credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And that was most helpful. We were able to pull Dad's credit report and keep an eye on what was happening and sort of, in some way, try to stay 2 steps ahead of what was going on. If you've ever done the free annual credit report from these agencies, you know that normally they'll give you a report 1 time a year. And I cannot say much good about this pandemic that we've all endured for the last 2 years, but this was one thing that helped us because so many people were affected financially by the pandemic. The 3 reporting agencies have relaxed that yearly requirement and are allowing people to pull their credit reports once a week from each company. So thankfully, we were able to take advantage of that and keep pulling Dad's credit reports and seeing all the credit cards that were being opened, all the loans that were being taken out in his name. The police, when we reported it to them, also told us that they were investigating some mail theft. And we didn't know if any of this fraud had occurred through the mail, but they wanted us to report it to the Postmaster General at any rate, because if some of the fraud had occurred in the mail, then that also became an issue for the post office as well. So we did that. We're now in late January. Dad's health began declining very rapidly at that point, and sadly we lost him on February 3rd. Robin, if you can, thank you. February 3rd was a Wednesday. Here's where the loss of the phone number became significant, because now at a time when our mother needed the love and support and comfort from her friends and family members, they could not reach her because they still had the old phone number. And when we think of identity theft, we often think about monetary losses and financial losses, but there are other intangible losses too, things that you can't put a price tag on, and that was one of them. And it saddened us that our mother was denied the sympathies and the comfort from those friends and family members because they could not reach her. 2 days later, on Friday, February 5th, Cynthia, my mother, and I spent the better part of the afternoon at the funeral home planning Dad's services and making arrangements. Got home that night, I sat down with my computer to check the account like I had always done, and this time what I saw just about made me physically sick. Because that afternoon, somehow we've gotten a little ahead. Robin, can we go back? That's good, thank you. That afternoon, while we were at the funeral home, someone had hit 3 different branches of the State Employees Credit Union in an hour and a half's time and had made cash withdrawals totaling right at $14,000 out of Mom and Dad's checking account. It was very upsetting, not only because of the amount of money they got, but also I was able to pull up the withdrawal slips, an image of them, and see that for identification, Dad's driver's license number was written on the withdrawal slips. So now we knew that whoever's doing this has made a duplicate driver's license and was using it for ID to withdraw. I spent Friday night on the phone with the credit union getting the account locked down. She, of course, said I would have to come into a branch on Monday to actually close the account. Monday was the day of the funeral. However, and you think about the day that you're planning for a family funeral, you need that time that morning for bereavement, to grieve, for prayerful reflection, and to prepare to say goodbye to your loved one. But that was another intangible of the identity theft. We were denied that opportunity because that morning my sister was at the police station giving them this new information while I was at the bank trying to straighten out what had happened. I asked our banker, how could this have happened? And he said, well, it should not have. He said, but unfortunately, it does. And it happens so often that we even have a name for them. We call them the felony lane gangs. And what they do is this. They choose the busiest time of day for the bank, which, remember, it was Friday afternoon. They go to the drive-thru and they go to the farthest lane over away from the window. And remember, at this time, it was February. People are bundled up because it's cold. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so everyone is wearing a mask. And so it's hard to identify. I know if I were a teller in a window trying to identify someone in a car 3 lanes over who's wearing a mask and bundled up, I wouldn't be able to identify them either. So that's how it had happened. He said, I will take care of this. I will make sure that this is handled. And he did. He put red flags all over the account. And the next day, thankfully, by the next night, all of the money had been replaced in Mom and Dad's account. The red flags also served a purpose because the next day the fellow tried to show up at the first bank again that he had hit on Friday and tried to withdraw cash again. This time, however, the bank called the police and he was arrested. We know he pled guilty. We know he has served some time, but we think he may be out now. We also knew that he was not the mastermind behind all this. He was really just a gopher. At this point, too, some well-meaning friends and family would ask us, why are you still pursuing this? Your father is deceased. They can't hold you responsible for these charges any longer. They can't come after his estate for these charges. Nope, not gonna work. This is why we would not let it go. Cynthia and I were raised by 2 wonderful Christian parents, and this is how we were raised, to honor our father and mother, and we were not going to let our dad's reputation be trashed this way in his death. So we still plugged on. I can go ahead. The afternoon that we got home from the funeral, there was a message on Dad's cell phone from a gentleman at a financial institution in the same city where all the credit card charges had occurred. And he had left a message for Dad saying that he would like to speak with him about the online loan application Dad had submitted 3 days earlier. No. So we called this gentleman back, explained to him what happened, and again, the right person in the right place at the right time. Because the fellow explained to us that he was a retired FBI agent, and now in his retirement, he was working part-time for this financial institution in their security division. And he told us, based on my experience in the FBI, I just knew something like this, something did not look quite right about this one, and so I'm denying it. And again, if any other loan officer had looked at that, it might have gone through. But we were fortunate to have this retired FBI executive look at this account. In the meantime, we had noticed, as I mentioned on Dad's credit report, they were opening loans right and left, taking out loans right and left in other places. We had seen one for an auto loan at a dealer in the same town where the fellow tried to change the mailing address on the bank account. Didn't know much about it, though. We didn't know what kind of car they had gotten until a couple months later. Dad started getting postcards in the mail about his introductory warranty on his new 2020 Nissan Altima. Pretty car that Dad bought, isn't it? So we turned that information over to the police, and they investigated, and here's the story they told us. They said on February 10th, which was exactly a week after Dad had passed away, a woman had come to the dealer and wanted to purchase a car, and she told the salesman that she had someone that could co-sign for the loan, but he was elderly, and because of COVID, he could not come into the dealership. But if the salesman would go with her to his house, she could get him to sign, and then she'd be able to purchase the car. The salesman did, got the signature. She came back and purchased the car and drove off. Somehow, don't know quite how, but a few days later, the car dealer figured out they had been scammed. So they called her up and told her that normally when they sell a new car, they offer an introductory oil change and a complimentary tank of gas. But they had failed to do that for her. So if she would bring the car back in, they would make good on that promise. I promise you cannot make this stuff up. She brought it back in, at which point they confiscated the car. I don't know why they didn't call the police and have her arrested. I think they were just happy to get their car back and let it end with that. Shortly after that, we did notice that loan disappeared off of Dad's credit report, thank goodness. In the meantime, we're now very actively trying to pursue all of these things that are being opened in his name and to get them stopped. Many phone calls were made to companies, and I know you know from dealing with credit card companies and financial institutions and so forth and so on, every phone call is at least 45 minutes. We prepared packets to send in mailings with a cover letter explaining what had happened. We included the police reports from all the cash withdrawals. We included the report number of the Federal Trade Commission report. Those kind of reports lend credibility to your case when you have to notify creditors about it. We also included a copy of the death certificate. We included copies of the letters testamentary stating that my sister and I are co-executors of his estate and that it was okay for them to speak with us about this. I will be honest with you, it is very exhausting. And many afternoons I came home exhausted, weary, beat down, and ready to give up. And I know several times I would come in and plop down on the couch, and with tears in my eyes, I would say to my husband, will this ever end? One day in particular, I came home and did that. The next morning, I got up. Robin, if we can change. Got out my daily devotional to read it the next morning before work, and this was the scripture for that lesson. And I knew God was speaking right to me because I was there. I was brokenhearted and crushed in spirit. That scripture gave me the strength to keep going and to keep plugging on, and we still continue to. Time goes by, and we still don't know how all this happened and how it got started. Until one day in April, Mom got a letter from the IRS stating that she owed $900 and it had to be paid by May 15th to avoid penalty. Mom knew she had paid that. Mom and Dad had their taxes set up on quarterly payments, and she had written a check for that payment on December 31st. And she remembered it because they had driven to the post office and dropped it in the mailbox, and then because it was New Year's Eve day, they went out to dinner. A few days after that, I happened to ride by that post office mailbox and saw that it was badly beaten up and looked as if someone had definitely tried to get inside it. We now know someone did get inside it and did steal the mail, and that's where all this started. I have kind of created my own little checks to show you how Mom's check looked and what the person did to this check. The first one is the check the way Mom wrote it. The check was, of course, had their name and address printed in the top left corner, but Mom then had written in the telephone number and Dad's Social Security number at the top of the check. We questioned that, why would you put your Social Security number on the check? And she pulled out the instructions from the IRS that state, be sure to write your telephone number and your Social Security number on your check so that your payment is credited to the right account. Nobody else in the world that I know of requires you to write your entire Social Security number down anywhere anymore but the IRS. So, if we can go one more. What was even more disturbing was on this check now. We had gotten the image of it from the bank. On the check where it said U.S. Treasury, someone had put a slash and had written in a man's name beside it. And on the back of the check had signed the man's name, endorsed it. And hard as that was to believe that somebody would do it, what was even harder to believe was that somebody would actually cash something that looked like that. Exactly. We don't know where it was cashed. Our banker said there was not enough information on the back of the check to tell where it was cashed, but somebody did cash that check. If we can. So I'm sure our thief was happy with that, because from that one check, he had hit the jackpot. From that one check, he was able to get Dad's name, address, phone number, checking account number, social security number, and $900 cash out of that one check. So now we knew how it all happened. My advice is, don't mail anything from outdoor post office boxes. I mean, they thought they were safe mailing it from a drop box right there at the post office. Best advice is to take it in to the post office and mail it inside if you can. But for our senior adults, see, who these kind of people prey on, that's not easy for them to get into the post office always to make that deposit. So that's where we need to step in and help wherever we see a need. Time went by, and we were still contacting companies, and lots of times the companies would write a letter back to us explaining that they had investigated and determined that it was fraud, and they were dropping that account. Sometimes they didn't respond to us, but we would just notice that that loan or that credit card, whatever, had disappeared from Dad's account, and we were happy with that because that was our ultimate goal anyway, was to get rid of those on his credit report. A couple of months went by, and we're now at June. And one day we got an email. We had seen on Dad's credit report a $9,000 loan that had been issued, but it didn't tell us where it was used or what it was used for. So in June, we got an email from a legal analyst at the company where the loan had been acquired, and he said he had conducted an investigation, and here's what he had found. And he attached for us a letter from a cosmetic surgery clinic here in North Carolina that stated that this woman, and it gave her name, was a patient of theirs. She began seeing them in February. She had a liposuction done in March, and that my dad had electronically signed to bear financial responsibility for that liposuction, and he signed on April 1st. No. We were completely blown away. Again, you can't make this stuff up. And what was even more disturbing, the cosmetic surgery clinic said, "We have concluded our portion of the investigation, and there will be no more information forthcoming." However, they did attach for us this woman's entire file from the cosmetic surgery clinic, all of her financial records, all of her medical records detailing the procedure that was done. So I'm sitting at home at my computer scrolling through this 36-page report that they sent us, and I came to one page that had a photocopy of the woman's driver's license on it. Scrolled down 2 more pages, and there was a photocopy of Dad's driver's license. And it was the exact same driver, and we still have his driver's license in our possession. But they had obviously taken that identifying information that we spoke about at the very beginning and used that with the DMV to get a duplicate license made. So there was Dad's driver's license on her account. Fortunately, the lending company determined that it was fraud, and shortly thereafter, that one disappeared off of Dad's credit report as well. We were very thankful. As I mentioned earlier, our case is still going on. We are just waiting. We did learn back in the fall that the prime suspect was arrested twice in 2 different counties for the same types of financial crimes. However, he is out right now. We're waiting for an indictment, but as you know, our judicial system is, like everything else right now, is quite backlogged from 2 years of pandemic delays and cancellations. So we're waiting for the indictment. But I want to, before I conclude this morning, I'd like to at least leave you with some tips on what to do if this happens to you and to any seniors that this may happen to. Just very quickly, definitely contact your bank, review anything with your bank accounts, look for any changed addresses, PINs, new cards that have been ordered on your account. Contact the major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. You can place a fraud alert on your credit report. We did that for Dad shortly after we discovered all this started. And most of the time, we learned that the 3 companies work very closely together. Most of the time, we dealt with Equifax, and they were very good about notifying Experian and TransUnion as well. So that does save you a little time not having to contact all 3 yourself. Contact any other creditors, such as credit card companies, utility providers, banks, and lenders. We have learned of another couple that live in the same town with mom whose mail was stolen the same time dad's was. They had written their power bill, a check for their power bill, made it out to Duke Energy. The same person had put a slash and written the same man's name beside Duke Energy and had cashed their power bill check. They learned of it when Duke Energy contacted them and said, we have not received your payment. And so that's how this has come about for them as well. Definitely file a report with your local police. That's where you should start. As we mentioned, it lends credibility to your case when you're having to deal with creditors and other lenders. Report the criminal activity to the Federal Trade Commission. We did ours online at identitytheft.gov, but they will also do that with you over the phone. And that's a good practice to do, and make sure you have it on file with them. Contact any other agencies as appropriate, as we had to as well, the Postal Service, Social Security Fraud Hotline, and the DMV. As we had to, all three of those agencies were involved in our case. Continue to carefully review all of your accounts. Ongoing account monitoring is strongly recommended. For many of our seniors, the way they've conducted business all their lives is they get their monthly statement in the mail from the bank, they check it out and make sure everything's okay, and then they don't think about it again until next month's statement comes out. But a lot can happen in that month in between statements. So ongoing account monitoring is definitely recommended. And definitely document everything. I'm a retired teacher, my sister is a nurse. Documentation has been a part of our professional lives for years. So we have documented everything. We've saved every mailing we've received on this. We have documented every phone call, even detailing the conversations, and it has proved helpful. We have kept a notebook. It's kind of an infamous notebook, I understand, between our law enforcement investigators. Several of them have asked us about the notebook, and can they see the notebook and get information from it? So we have been able to share that, and from what they've told us, it's been very helpful in getting enough evidence for the indictment that they are seeking. I also was fortunate to attend back last spring a webinar that was sponsored by the retired governmental employees, and the featured speaker that day at the webinar was Mr. David Kirkman. David is a retired attorney with the State Attorney General's Office. He has written a book, Elder Fraud Wars, which you can see there, and I have here. I got this copy of David's book, and in his book, he chronicles a lot of the scams and frauds that he prosecuted during his career with the Attorney General's Office, which was a little bit different from ours with identity theft, but there was so much in this book that helped me just to affirm that we were on the right track and we were doing what we were supposed to be doing, and how to report this and how to fight this for our seniors. David is here with us today. He's going to speak with us in a little bit. He has a table in our fellowship hall with the vendors, and I hope you will be able to stop by and speak with him, and definitely pick up a copy of his book. It is very eye-opening. I know in my family we thought, oh, identity theft, that happens in LA, New York, Chicago. No. When you read David's book, you will realize it is happening right here in North Carolina, right under our noses. And thank heavens for him and other law enforcement agencies that are helping us to fight this and helping us protect our seniors. So I'm going to conclude with just a few of the lessons I have learned during this process and share them with you. And hopefully, my honest hope is that you will never have to deal with this. But if you do, hopefully some of my little tidbits will help you as well. First of all, I learned that someone can steal your phone number. I had no idea that was even a thing that people can do, but we learned the hard way that your phone number can be stolen. Consider having yours unlisted, although in our case that wouldn't have made any difference because they got the phone number off the check. But just be careful with where you share that information. Be careful when assigning an overdraft account to your checking account. This was something I had never thought of, and after the 3 cash withdrawals that day, a friend mentioned that to me, and it made a lot of sense. If you have an overdraft account attached to your checking account, if the thief is withdrawing money from your checking account and gets away with it for a period of time, then when that account's empty, he's going to start withdrawing funds out of your overdraft account now because it will kick in. So be careful. It's made me reconsider how I have mine set up and how much money is available for overdraft. So just be cautious with that. Third one we touched on a little bit, Social Security Administration does not recognize power of attorney. You must set up a payee representative. I'll be glad to speak with you individually after we finish if you have questions about that and let you know what that involves and what you need to do for that. We did go ahead and set me up as the payee rep for my mother, and I even, after that experience, went into my Social Security account online and have already designated my payee representatives for when the day comes that I'll need some help managing my finances too. We also learned that felony lane gangs do exist. And once they have your identifying information, it's very easy for them to withdraw money from your account. As we mentioned, all they need is account numbers, driver's license, and Social Security number, and they're in. So be very careful with that. It was eye-opening to me to realize that the IRS still requires you to write your Social Security number on payments to the U.S. Treasury. Online payments are much safer. If you're not comfortable doing them online, or if you have other senior relatives and friends that are not, I put on here we should ask our children to help us with electronic banking, because as baby boomers, we didn't grow up with computers either. And so I can often use help. Baby boomers, we've had to learn, a lot of us, to function in today's society, but there are still times when I call on my two daughters to show me how to do something on the computer or to get me in somewhere that I need to get in, and they know how to do it right off the bat. And the last tip that I want to leave with you that I learned is that investing in an online financial protection service is well worth the money. I listed a couple of them here. Norton LifeLock and McAfee Security are a couple. There are others out there too. They're not cheap, but it is well worth the peace of mind to have somebody looking after your accounts. I can say that they are Johnny on the spot. When the dust kind of settled when all this started, and my mother did finally reapply for a new credit card at the bank, the very next morning, Norton LifeLock called her to make sure that was her. My husband just bought a new car Saturday. Before we got home with it, Norton LifeLock had called home to see if that was him that actually purchased the car that day. So it is very valuable, especially if you don't want to keep up with it daily or monitor it online. It's nice to know that you have them watching your back and looking out for you. So as I said, we are still waiting for the conclusion of this. And Robin, if we can go one more. Thank you. And it's been a difficult process the past year, but right now we are in a much better place, mentally, emotionally, and spiritual than we were a year ago. And as I have always done and continue to do, I look for scripture to keep me going. And Isaiah 41:10 is what keeps me going. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. And knowing that, I can still plug on and carry on. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed speaking with you. And I would love to speak with you when we're finished here. Catch me in the hall. Some of you may have stories of your own of scams and frauds that you're aware of, so I would love to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy.